Hey everyone, it's Gary here from Echidna, and today we are going to take a look at the very vexing question of can you reuse pre-wound bobbins? That's the plastic pre-wound bobbins. Should you reuse them? And I'm going to dig into this and show you the whys and wherefores of whether you should or shouldn't. So let's get into it. Okay, pre-wound bobbins, they're a really convenient thing, and there's so many different styles, brands, qualities, etc. And I know that for a lot of people, the concept of winding your own bobbin is something you don't want to get into. It's really not that hard, and we'll explain that in a moment. But the convenience of pre-wound bobbins can't be overstated. So the question that we see a lot on a lot of the groups, and certainly we get asked, is can we reuse them? The simple answer is yes and no. That's not simple, is it? If you know what you're doing, I'm going to say yes, you can, as long as you're careful. But I'm going to explain exactly why you do have to be super careful when using a pre-wound bobbin. Now, hopefully camera guy can follow me here. So in fact, I might put these back up on the top here. And I've got a brand, this is a Brother bobbin that I'm pointing to right now. It's a really beautiful bobbin, very high quality, smooth, and just a really nice bobbin. And this one is an empty pre-wound bobbin. Now, it's just not as good. Like, you can look at the quality of it. It just doesn't look the same. It looks like a cheaper plastic. It's not quite as smooth, however, it is the same specifications. It's exactly the same size, everything is the same, it's just a cheaper bobbin. And the reason it's a cheaper bobbin is because it's made as a pre-wound, it's a single-use bobbin, and you could imagine a box of pre-wound bobbins using the really high-quality bobbins would be hideously expensive. So that's why they're a cheaper bobbin. Comes down to quality of plastic and just the general manufacturing of it. But the thing to remember is a pre-wound bobbin, so here's one that's actually fully wound, is wound in a controlled sort of conditions. So the factory that makes them, they do millions and millions of them. The machinery that winds them is perfect, and you get this perfect wound bobbin, and that's why they're kind of, they work really well. They also are as full as they could be without being overfilled, and that means you get better yield out of a pre-wound bobbin, so you're changing your bobbins less. So if the convenience and the slightly, higher cost in using pre-wound bobbins is what you want, then go ahead and use pre-wound bobbins. Now, the question, as I said, is can you reuse them when they're empty? Now, I'm going to explain what actually happens when you wind a bobbin. If you wind a bobbin on pretty much any machine on the market and you do it exactly the way the manufacturer has recommended for you, it would probably be okay. But there's a couple of variables there. If the thread you're using, and I'm not saying it's a bad thread or anything, if the thread you're using has a slightly elevated tension or it pulls a bit tighter through the machine, when it's winding onto the bobbin, it will actually stretch or push the bobbin apart. And I'm going to show you practically what I mean there. I'm going to use my set of vernier calipers, and to be honest, every home should have a set of vernier calipers. These are fantastic. We're going to measure, hopefully camera guy's got that in shot, good. We're going to measure the diameter or the height of this genuine bobbin, and it's 11.29 millimeters, or 11.3, so it's close enough. Take that out. Let's measure the pre-wound bobbin that is empty. It's 11.43, 11.45, marginally thicker, but anything under 11.5 is going to be fine. So no dramas, it's the right size. Now, you'll see what I've got here is a commercial bobbin winder, and it has a tensioning device on it. And I'm showing you this because I'm simulating the problem for you, and because I can adjust the tension here, I can apply more tension to the thread that I'm winding onto the bobbin. So I've already wound a couple at different tensions. So here is another bobbin. I think this is actually a good bobbin that's been wound fairly tight. You can see it's still at 11.37, so it's still well within range. I could use that bobbin. But then I took, again, another good bobbin, not a pre-wound, a genuinely good bobbin, and I tightened the tension right up. Now let's see what we've got there. and we've gone up to 11.74. So that's swollen the bobbin by tightening the tension. And 11.74 is getting a little bit out there, probably still not going to cause you too much grief, but could potentially in certain circumstances. But nonetheless, by winding the thread tighter on the same style of bobbin, I was able to increase or sort of stretch the bobbin. Now I have another one here that is a pre-wound bobbin that was wound exactly the same time after I just wound the previous one that I've just shown you. And I had the same tension. Now let's measure that. We're getting close to 12 millimeters. So right, 11.95. So we've really added a lot of height to that bobbin. Now you might think, what's the problem with that? But if the bobbin is swollen that way, it has the propensity to get caught during the stitching process. So as the machine's stitching, the thread's coming around the bobbin case, it's actually engulfing the whole bobbin case. That extra height in the bobbin means that if it's, and the bobbin bounces around in the machine a little bit, and if it jumps up a little bit, the thread can actually catch under the lip of the bobbin and jam your machine up. So you do not want bobbins to swell. And that's really the main issue with using pre-wound bobbins. If you don't know exactly what you're doing and you're not careful with how tight the thread is being wound, they will swell. And I'm going to show you something really crazy here. Again, simulating the problem, but I've seen this many, many times. If the thread winds too tightly and the bobbin is not of a good quality, this can happen. So I'll show you there. Camera guy, you got that in shot? The bobbin exploded, and there's the bobbin thread just all falling off, and there's the other tip of the bobbin. In my 40 years, I have seen tons of bobbins simply been overwound too tight, and the bobbin, it sort of self-destructs. You don't have to do anything. The top just pops off. And if that happens while you're stitching, you have got it's just going to jam up your machine, right? That's end of story. You'll jam your machine up. Hopefully you won't cause any damage. You'll be able to unjam it, but you know, you could damage the item you're embroidering on. You could, in the worst case scenario, damage your bobbin case, break a needle. You could even, if you're really unlucky, knock your timing out on the machine. So that's unlikely, but it can happen, and it has happened, and I've seen it. So the short answer to this is wind your bobbin correctly. Now I'm going to just quickly show you on this machine a couple of things to point out. Most machines have a very similar bobbin winding system. And there's also, you know, you've got the different sizes of bobbin threads. For instance, this is the Hemingway 1500 meter bobbin thread, and this is the Echidna 5000 meter bobbin thread. Now, if you've got a machine like this, obviously this will not fit on the machine, but all you need is a thread stand of some sort to use that thread. And we would just run that up across into the machine and into the bobbin winding. I'm going to actually use the Hemingway 1500 meter here because not everyone has one of these thread stands, and we're just going to pop that on the machine. I know white's a little hard to see, and you know what, I could actually, I'll use a different color thread because that might just be a wee bit easier to see. So let's just grab this red thread. And that actually leads into another question. Do you have to use bobbin thread when you're winding your bobbin? The answer is you don't have to. You can use any thread as long as you make sure that the tension is set. And I've got other videos that explain all that, so please watch those. But bobbin thread is usually a bit finer, so you get more thread on the bobbin, and that means you're changing less bobbins. And of course, in the main for embroidery, we're using white, mostly white, sometimes black, and just, you know, occasionally different colors. But in order to show you how to thread this, we'll go this way. So I'm going to take my bobbin, put it on here like so, and we just follow the numbers. Now, on this machine, it's the little dotted numbers. But pretty much every bobbin winder on most machines will have a little tensioning device. So this one is right here. Camera guy, you got that in shot? And we follow the instructions, we loop that around, and we make sure that the thread is in the little tension guide. Now on this particular machine, we just simply wind the thread around the bobbin a few times, and then there's a little cutter. Now I'm going to try and keep my finger out the way there as I show you this. Just there, and we pull that back down and cut that off, engage the bobbin winder, and wind the thread. Now, if I haven't threaded this correctly, or I've got this wrapped around here twice and it's pulling too tight, the bobbin will wind too tight, and that will expand the bobbin. So just follow the instructions. The other thing you don't want to do is wind it around 1,000 times and have loads of thread at the end of the bobbin where it can get caught when you're getting closer to the end of the bobbin. And of course, if you don't thread it into the little tensioning device, you'll wind your bobbin too loosely, and that presents another set of issues in the machine. So when you put a loose bobbin into the machine, the bobbin will jump and bounce and do all sorts of weird and wonderful things that you don't want. You will also find that on most machines, the bobbin will wind usually quite square. If we have a look at this pre-wound bobbin, camera guy can see that, I hope. It's perfectly wound because it's done under controlled conditions. Let me take a bobbin that I wound elsewhere, and even though this is expanded, you can see that it's not as perfect as the pre-wound bobbin. And this is still okay if it wasn't swollen. The way that's actually wound would be all right. But most machines have a little adjustments to adjust the level or the way the bobbin is winding. And that's a different video we could do altogether. And you've also got the ability to set a stop position so you don't overwind your bobbin. That's really important too. Make sure that you do not fill a bobbin right to the outside of the perimeter, because if you do, it will pull tight in the bobbin case and cause you all sorts of other grief. You're better to slightly underwind a bobbin than to overwind a bobbin. So look, all in all, obviously we'll just quickly run this a little bit here. We'll hit the bobbin winder button, and that will wind a nice bobbin. Don't always think you've got to fill a bobbin just because you might be using a particular color. You can stop it any time you like. If you only need a little bit of bobbin thread on a bobbin, just stop it when you're ready. But that's winding quite perfectly, and the tension that's being applied to this thread is exactly as the manufacturer intended it to, and that bobbin will wind beautifully. So my advice is, if you've got a good machine with a good bobbin winder and you're comfortable doing it, don't be scared to wind your own. You don't need to use pre-wounds. It's the convenience factor that you're looking at there, and of course the consistency of pre-wound bobbins is very good as well. And in summary, we'll stop that now, we don't need to fill that. In summary, when we look back at the main discussion point for this little video is, should I reuse pre-wound bobbins? My answer is best not to, unless you really, really know what you're doing and what to look for. And in saying that, having a pair of vernier calipers, which are really easy to use beside your machine, and checking the diameter or the height of a bobbin is actually not a bad idea if you're not sure about it. They're not very expensive, and something worth having in your sewing room. That's pre-wound bobbins. Yeah, I wouldn't reuse them. In fact, I'd probably wind my own if I was comfortable doing that, and save yourself some money and use good bobbins. But don't hesitate to get in touch with us if you have any questions about pre-wound bobbins at all. And hopefully you found this little video helpful. Cheers for now.